Welcome back to the Pine Tree Pulse podcast, and very pleased this week to bring in Bobby Charles, candidate for the, I was going to say for the Republican nomination, but that's now in the rearview mirror, isn't it? Candidate for governor, and of course is the Republican standard bearer. And we had a conversation, I guess, and now I'm thinking back to it, it's like a year plus ago. I mean, you were our first gubernatorial interview when we were launching this series, so thank you for doing that. You're back again, and you're back again because you won that primary. So,
no, I'm probably back because of that first interview with you.
Well, I'll take the credit if you want. It's fine. But I think actually that would be where I would begin with you today. That was a long primary. You launched fairly early, and you made a pretty strong case right out of the gate. And that case seems to have carried you through the primary. Do you want to take me back a little bit to how you won this? I mean, it was when you're looking at the final numbers, both in the first round of the ranked choice voting tabulation, or as I like to call it, the election, you had a very comfortable, I think, 17-point lead. Yeah. And then after all the retabulations took place, you had, I think, about the same, maybe a little bigger, somewhere in the same vicinity. So it was a rather large win, no matter how you counted it, no matter how you cut it. And I'm sure we could have some fun conversations about ranked choice voting, but just tell me how that happened from the beginning here. Was it an ideas thing? Was it a Bobby Charles person thing?
I think sometimes the stars align, and you only realize they've aligned when you look backwards. I think this state, and I'll include 80% of this state, is sick and tired of where we're at. And already 3 or 4 years ago, I was sick and tired of where we were at. I think average people were, and they felt powerless. A lot of people in this state felt that they were discouraged. They felt that there's no way out of the woods, and we're just stuck with this sort of accelerating socialism in the state, and we can't do anything about it, and the incompetence and the corruption. And I think what happened, I announced
dissatisfaction with the status quo then.
Very much so. Yeah. And I think April 15 of 2025, I actually, interesting, some inside baseball, I was really not inclined to announce then. But I had a bunch of people come to me, very credible people from within the state, from without of the state, who said, look, your credentials line up against this problem set as if they were made for this problem set. I have handled billions of dollars, as I said on the campaign trail. I've cut, bureaucrats. I've been an oversight guy, investigator for 5 years, federal litigator, had worked in the Reagan White House, know economics, have a couple of degrees that help in that area. I'd spent my life around a business for 25 years. I know how to fix problems, and I had been put in charge of some big problems. Gingrich put me in charge of some. Colin Powell put me in charge of some. I was the guy that was told that to go set up the Iraqi police, and we had nothing on the ground. And we set it up, and we got 35,000 as the president wanted within a year. Got 37,000 in Afghanistan. Helped take down the Cali cartel. 10 years Navy intelligence. And if you look back and you look at what was going on a year and a half ago, or a little less than that, this state has been miserably managed. It has been managed, and not at all. It's been they've basically thrown the reins to the wind and let the horses go where they want to go, and that has created chaos in this state. Not just in the Democrat Party, which we can certainly talk about, but it has created a kind of chaos that has put people very much ill at ease. Older people that I've talked to, and I would say the last 14 months, I've done, oh my God, I can't even count the number of events, hundreds and hundreds of events. I've probably met 25,000 Mainers in a context of either just like this, 3, 4, 5 people, or several hundred people in an event. And I will tell you that the things that we were saying back then, to go to message, were very straightforward. We need to cut the property taxes because they're crippling. They're creating tremendous anxiety in this state, which is the oldest state in the United States, as you know, demographically. People are on fixed incomes, north and south. They cannot afford to continue to pay these out-of-control property taxes, which are driven by the unfunded mandates, which are driven by a Democrat-controlled legislature. So we got to get those unfunded mandates out of the schools, get them out of the prisons, get them out of the environmental. We got to go back to basic common sense and give a lot of this power back to the towns, so that the state isn't leaning in like a vulture over the town. So the first thing was property taxes. That message resonated a lot. Income taxes was the second. I think we can get $1 billion out of this budget in the first year, and I am very optimistic that with feedback loops and the multiplier effect and the sales tax collecting a lot of that money back again as people spend it on what they want to spend it on, I ultimately think we're going to get it down closer to zero. But the income tax was a second big one. Both of those have a tremendous impact on young people, and we spiked, Matt. We spiked very hard. We were the highest, I think, polling with young people in this 8-person race, and we were the highest with independents, which is very unusual, at least in our polling, because I said, why? And when I talk to young people, they say, because I can't pay my rent, and I cannot, my income doesn't pay for me to be able to have the most basic things, which is their groceries, their clothes, their basic social life, and the rent. And so that was a first sign that, older folks and younger are also looking at this economic system and saying it's just not working for me. Then you add in energy costs. That was the third big issue. Jim Lebrecht working with me, a lot of others. I've seen so many policy papers. I mean, I love your policy papers, but I've seen so many. And then you add in education, which is also collapsing under us. It's like the house of an old floor, the floor of an old house. It's collapsing under us. And then you had the fraud. And of course, Steve Robinson and the team there, John and everybody, Joe, doing an amazing job bringing out these facts. I think there is a moment in time sometimes when you can go out to meet history, and sometimes you sit still and history comes and meets you. And what really happened with me is in April of a year ago, a lot of people descended on me and said, you really need to take this on. I know you don't need another certificate. I know you don't need this job, but Bobby, you got all these blessings. World War II vets trained you. They did. You've gotten a great education. I worked for it, but I still got it. You've had these unbelievable experiences. I'm sort of like a Forrest Gump walking around, having spent time with Reagan and these people. And they said, look, Maine truly needs you. They need someone who will step into the breach and fix these things. And I will tell you, that is my motivation. I have I'm a service-oriented person. I'm not. If I had been otherwise, I would have been very rich, and I'm not very rich. I'm like the Jimmy Stewart candidate here. We were funded by 7,000 Mainers who underwrote this campaign. And I think the answer to the question is we hit a sweet spot, or maybe a sour spot, a spot where people are so unhappy, and the things that I can bring to the table will help turn the state back around again and get us back to normal. It's very straightforward. It's not rocket science. Just get fiscal responsibility back, get rule of law back on the streets, get the illegal aliens out of here, get the drug traffickers out of here, work to get real addiction services in here, go after the fraud, the 6,000 plus contracts that seem to have been sole source, non-compete. I would say every one of them looks like a felony criminal referral. If I spent 5 years as a federal investigator, they would all have been federal criminal referrals if they were above the threshold and they were going to friends and family. That's a conflict of interest. And so, I look at it and I think, Matt, part of what just happened here is that the people of Maine are ready for change. And I'm even finding Democrats, I'll call them the Harry Truman, JFK, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton Democrats, and independents are already coming to me since the primary and saying, look, you got to win. And it's different reasons. You got to win because my property taxes are out of control. You got to win because I can't pay for the energy. You got to win because I'm going to move to Florida. You got to win because my kids are moving away. You got to, and of course, what they see on the other side is the loss of their party. They have no home. Their party has become increasingly progressive, as illustrated by everybody from the Bernie Sanders, Graham Plattner candidacy to Pingree. They've become left. They are a left-leaning party. And
their mainstream is now left, whereas their mainstream used to be mainstream.
Yeah,
right?
Pick any Democrat who really was a Scoop Jackson, Sam Nunn, John F. Kennedy, a Democrat, they would all be Republican today, or at the very least, they wouldn't be voting for these people. And I think it's a sadness. I mean, Maine, we think of Maine, as I was mentioning off air, we think of Maine as a backwater, but we're a cheap date. What's happened is they've poured a lot of money into this state to try to make this state socialist. And they've been winning up until, frankly, the Maine Policy Institute and the Maine Wire and a bunch of people woke up and said, connect the dots. Connect the dots. Everything's out of control. Your affordability is out of control. You got needles in all the streets. You got 8,000 overdoses. You got illegal aliens everywhere. You got energy subsidies nobody can afford. Connect the dots. This is because you have elected people who you might have thought were reasonable Ed Muskie-style Democrats, but they're not. They're actually leftists. They're either conscious or unconscious devotees of what I'd call Marxist, Maoist economics.
Yeah. As you were talking about what you have identified out in the electorate for their feelings, why they embraced you as a candidate. I couldn't help but also think about what's going on in the Democratic Party right now, too, because while I think that their diagnosis and what they want to do about it is obviously quite wrong, the progressive left, that activist base, the people that are powering the Plattner campaign, which, of course, just imploded this week, they're dissatisfied with how things are. I mean, it's their political establishment has failed them. They hate their own party. Janet Mills attempted to run for that Senate seat right along with Plattner, and she got humiliated out of that race.
She did.
And I think largely because they viewed her as the old guard who's been responsible for doing a lot to the state that has not been very successful and hasn't really worked. And they're frustrated and they want something different. And so they turn to somebody like Plattner, which I think is a big mistake, obviously, and I think at this point everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
But the diagnosis remains the same, right? And as we look at your race,
it does.
Now that it's hard to pay attention to with all this national attention on the Senate race, but you look at you and Pingree, and then obviously Rick Bennett in there as well. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to say that Hannah Pingree would be a change agent, that she would be different from the status quo. She was a major part of the Mills administration this entire time. So I think that she represents the politics you've seen for the last 8 years. So if you like it, you keep voting for that, sure. But if you don't, and it seems like most people don't, you're probably looking somewhere else. So if you're looking at the optimistic side of this campaign, that's probably got to be where it is.
Yeah, it's you don't even have to be optimistic intuitively, which I am. You can just look at the data. There was a poll that came out about 2 weeks ago that said that only 11% of Maine Democrats believe we're on the right track. So 89% of independents, 11% of independents believe that Maine is on the right track. So 89% of independents don't believe that Maine is on the right track. And then I get calls. I got a call 2 days ago, and this one blew me right out of my chair. I'm sitting, I'm dialing for dollars. I'm trying to make sure that we have enough resourcing so that I'll go out, talk to the big groups, show we've raised a lot of money since the primary, and then the big groups pour millions of dollars in here, and that's how this traditionally works. And so, again, I've never done this before, but these are groups that are, people like the Club for Growth and the Republican Governors Association, and they can help us win the legislature, they can help us win my race, they can help us win Paul's race, and also Senator Collins. So, you go out and you present to them, which I will be doing. But the stunning part is just 2 days ago, I got a call from an older Democrat, and he said, my wife and I have been lifetime Democrats, and they were older than I am, and they obviously were very, historically true to the Democratic Party. He said, we don't recognize this party anymore, and we will max donate to you. Both of us are going to max donate to you. So I kept him on the phone for a while. He had never met me before. He knew one person that I knew, and he had apparently seen things online. And I just, went back and I said, help me understand for my own edification, what brought you to that decision? And really, it's the fact that they don't see anything being normal in the state. If there were a handbook on how to screw up this state, overspend, overregulate, overtax, put us in decline, put us in essentially poised for contraction, chasing the tax base right out of the state. The Democrats have not missed a play in the book. They've done everything. And
there's really no outcomes that look good.
There are no outcomes that look good. And to your point, the thing that, interestingly, I share with Plattner is that he posed himself, at least, as an outsider. I think he was an outsider, maybe so far outside that he really should never be in politics, but that's okay. The reason he got 200,000 plus votes is because he was not the Augusta insiders. He was not the people who people are sick and tired of. And that's exactly I won by 20 points almost in a race of 8, and we were outspent on ads 70-1, and I think our total over everything was probably 15-1. And the answer as to why, I think, is you have a credible candidate who will deliver on results. You can go back and look at the things I've done in the military, the civilian world. I will deliver. And people are truly, it's almost as if it's like in addiction, when someone finally hits the bottom, they're sick and tired of it. It's either out or up. And so, right now, I think Mainers are looking around, and interestingly, to use that same phrase, out or up, It's just sort of washing over me right now. It really is the same thing. Either this state gets fixed or they're out. They move to Florida, Tennessee.
There is
they're
a
out.
lot of that.
We lose 300 or 400 businesses a year already, or it's up. And I have had, you don't know how many people, I'm going to say dozens and dozens of people who've said, I'm going to support you. I want you to win. I want you to put everything you got into it. But if you don't, I'm leaving the state of Maine. And that has been young people, and that has been older people, and that has been business leaders who have punched a lot of money up. So I think we are at this inflection point in the state of Maine that we will look back upon and say that was the moment when the greater Maine, put party affiliation aside, the greater Maine woke up and said, you know what, this is our state. And we're sick and tired of being told what to do and having our frog ponds regulated and being told that everything that we want doesn't matter. And I do think that's why Plattner got the support that he got. He was an outsider, and I'm an outsider. And people say, you know what? The guy's got a record for fixing problems, and he's not part of the Augusta mafia.
Well, the response, I would imagine, from the Pingree people and the Democratic Party, and I think you've already heard this and you heard it through their primary too, but was to, I think, deflect the blame for the things you're unhappy with to somewhere else, right? Because it's really, to me, it's impossible not to point the finger at, Janet Mills, her administration, the Democrats in the legislature, et cetera, only because they were by themselves in control for 8 years. So it's, not just a partisan statement or whatever. It's like, who else can you blame when they're the only ones that are controlling anything? Yeah. But you hear Pingree say it all the time that this is a Donald Trump problem, that this is a federal problem, that this is all from Washington, D.C. Yeah. And one of the things that when I'm evaluating this election, this general election upcoming, that does cause me to be a little nervous here is that in any sort of primary, or any kind of midterm election year, the president in power usually suffers a political setback in some way. Yeah. Because if things aren't going the way that people want to, they blame him, they blame them, they blame Washington. Yep. How do you reach the people who might actually have some predisposed dislike of the president and they might actually blame him for things and convince them that, look, you got to point your fingers at the right target. Yeah. It's over here, not over there. If you're really interested in starting over and having a fresh start and throwing out the establishment or whatever, these are the people you have to throw out, and you got to go with me.
Yeah, I mean, that is essentially the message. I care about Maine. I really don't. I can't influence anything at the federal level. I have no influence. What I have is good relationships with the mid-level. A lot of, I have great relationships with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration leadership, DEA leadership, leadership at the Office of Justice Programs, leadership at OJJDP, leadership in places where we need to get money like ONDCP to get HIDTA status for all of our counties up here, high-intensity drug trafficking status. I think, number one, I'll just say, I think you're never going to convince people, and it's really not my job to convince them to like or dislike. If you like him, to dislike him. If you dislike him, to like him, Donald Trump. But he's really not the feature figure in this race. I am the feature figure in this race. I am the guy who's going to fix these problems. My whole track record on, as I said, I've spent a lot. I've run a business. I've downsized the federal government. I am very careful to reward people who work hard in the government and to remove dead wood very effectively, and we've done that. Done it in multiple environments. 5 years, I was an oversight investigator. I know what to look for. We did the Waco hearings. I did the first hearings on illegal immigration in 1996. We knew, that's why Gingrich, I think, and Meese and others endorsed me. If you want a problem solver, if you care about the state of Maine more than you hate Donald Trump, then I'm your guy, regardless of your political party.
Well, doesn't it also have to be said that even if you do dislike the guy or hate the guy or blame him for everything, he's only been back in office for, year and a half, 2 years.
Look,
right?
I like a lot of the policies Donald Trump promotes. I've been in his White House 6 times. I have friends who work for him. I think you probably have friends who worked for him. And look, you had to seal up our border. You had to go after the drug traffickers. You had to cut taxes. You had to put this country back on track. You had to start talking about love of country instead of hate of country. All of these things are common sense. But the real reason people ultimately should vote for me is that I am going to apply common sense to the problems that affect everyday Mainers. And what I will tell you is those problems affect everyday Mainers in Portland and Sanford and York and Ogunquit and Camden just as much as they affect, I mean, except for I'm not talking about summer people. I'm talking about year-round people, real voters. They just as they affect someone up in Fort Kent or Fort Fairfield or Holton or Calais, or Rangeley, or I mean, I've been in all these places, and these problems are all the same. Property taxes are too high because hundreds and hundreds of unfunded mandates have been pushed down on towns. Some counties are going bankrupt because they can't get out from under it. And some towns are struggling so much they're running their own tax base right out of the state. The income tax, it got raised over and over and over again. It was raised last year. It was raised this year. I did a little economic analysis of my own. It looks to me like that 2% surcharge may cost us between 8,000 and 16,000 jobs. The reason is that most of our businesses are small businesses, 90-some%. And if you're going to cut in order to make an income tax and you're going to stay in the country, if you're going to hit that surcharge, there's only one place to go, and that's labor. So if you got 20 people, you're going to cut one or two of them. And the same thing is true of energy costs. Energy costs jumped 36% last year, and people get,
highest in the nation, has to be said.
Highest in the nation,
Yeah.
exactly. And by the way, twice as high as the number 2 state, which was Connecticut. So people glaze when you hear statistics, but what you can't get away from is the impacts on their lives. And look at 30% increase in homeschooling. The main reason is that people don't trust the public school system anymore. Mm-hmm. A public school system that, as the Policy Institute knows well, was the best in the country in 1992, and now we're very near the bottom. We oscillate between 41st and 50th, okay? That is a disgrace, and it's a disgrace because this is not hard to fix. We have disempowered teachers. We have disempowered parents in favor of the bureaucracy in Augusta, a crazy curriculum that doesn't put anybody on a path to success, that rips out things like the trades, that underemphasizes math and reading and science and history and all the things that make people successful in favor of ideology and indoctrination into activism and excuses for everything. And if my left and right foot are different sizes, I'm disabled. And no, stop. You need to go back to basics, and you need to also steer kids in the direction of inspiration, hard work, understanding that resilience and self-reliance are what make us strong in life. If I graduate from high school and I can't read, I'm in deep water, and we have kids doing that right now. Some of my siblings teach, and they will tell you that that's happening. But actually, my brother teaches math. But it's what you will find at the end of the day is that we are not following basic, historically proven common sense. And that is also true in the area of public safety. Our law enforcement community is 100%, darn close to 100% behind me. A lot of the folks in the addiction field say, Bobby, we can't go out there publicly and talk about it, but the needles are not the answer, okay? 4 million needles being given away every year is not the answer. But I have the plans for fixing each of these components, including from energy to addiction. I've done half this stuff already in my life. And, on the addiction front, for example, we give away 240,000 units of Narcan. We now don't even count them anymore. And they say, whoa, we had a reduced number of overdoses. No, you didn't. You probably had double the number of overdoses, because what you did is you stopped having the EMTs and the law enforcement community count when they gave them, and you just gave them away. And they say, well, 4 million needles. Actually, the number is probably higher than 4 million because we don't count the numbers that are given away. I've been all over, the little boat launch in Mount Vernon, unorganized territories up in Cary. There are needles everywhere. You walk through Bangor, you walk through Waterville, you walk through the parks in Portland or in Augusta, or I mean, pick your poison. It's everywhere. So what I'll tell you is that average Mainers, whether they say, well, I'm always from a Democrat family, or I've always thought I'm an independent because I don't agree with either party, or the Republicans have gone too far toward Trump. At the end of the day, I say to them, I can't affect what Donald Trump does. I can't affect the nation. I happen to believe his policies are pretty solid. I have differences with him. Tariffs, I think we need to go down, and I need to go to the White House with a very good relationship with them and say, look, we need to get a waiver here on the Canada side of this because it's costing us 20%. We need to get over that and get back to common sense there. But the way tariffs work is he put tariffs on everything in order to get to China, and the reason was China was doing an end run around the rest of the world economy, not just in WHO and not just in WTO, but they were doing an end run by going to Botswana or Bulgaria and shipping their things out through another country, which then got them to escape the sanctions that other people and other restrictions on them. So Trump just said, listen, we're going to put tariffs on everything, and then we're going to negotiate bilaterals with all the rest, and eventually China's going to come around. I don't know if China will come around or not. They've come around a little bit, but and they are going after some of the fentanyl, which is good. But I will tell you that tariffs are like a fly-by-wire airplane. I've flown in an F-16, and it can either go all good one way or all bad the other way in a split second. It happens very fast. Tariffs are the same way. If you can leverage the system really quickly and get a lot of responsiveness, and you don't open up a trade war, actually you're in a pretty good position because we are the most powerful economy in the world. China's close, but we are. And then, but if you need to constantly, I don't know what the U.S. trade rep does every day, but you need to constantly be working that. And one of the things I'm going to do is go down and say, look, Maine businesses, we not only need to incentivize them, rewrite the tax code, bring a lot of Maine, not only keep the Maine businesses here, but bring like a magnet, bringing shards of metal, bring in new businesses, get the regulations down, get the taxes down, incentivize these new sectors, cross-laminate timber up north, lobster processing, get in a lot of the businesses that are Loring. We can bring aviation businesses. I'm already talking to aviation businesses that are interested to coming into the old Loring Air Force Base and putting business up there. If we can get our tax code right, our public safety right, our schools right, and fraud out of the state, we could become the model for the most prosperous state on the Eastern Seaboard.
Well, to the point I was making before, ultimately all I was really saying is that you love him, you hate him. Trump has been there for a year and a half, and these problems, you just went down a litany of them, right? They predated. Janet Mills has been in charge of the state for 8 years, and we started to see the education decline happen 5 or 6 years ago. We started to see the energy situation happen almost immediately upon her taking office. Taxes, local property taxes, housing problems. That the housing issue. Rents being so high in Portland and whatnot. That's a massive problem that has been around for a long time. So he's kind of irrelevant, is my point. He's not part of this at all.
Yeah, that's what I say to people all the time. I want you to put aside whatever your prejudices are at the national level and ask yourself, do my kids, do my neighbors, do my grandchildren deserve to have a better state? And if you want a better state, who's going to deliver that state to you? Is it going to be the handmaiden of Janet Mills, Hannah Pingree, who was her senior advisor, who was in charge of workforce when you brought in all the illegal aliens, who was in charge, and by the way, have had a terrible employment environment and training environment? Was it, Hannah Mills, who was in charge of housing, where we've had a complete fallout of the bottom? If you're under the age of 35 and you're working in Maine, the median income of that individual, the median income for those under 35 is $200 a month below median rent. That's a complete disaster for housing. It's the end of the American dream. It's what's chasing a lot of our workforce into New Hampshire. You're not doing anybody any favors there. What else? She was in charge of energy. So you've got net energy billing, which is, people say, oh, it's not bankrupting the state. No, it's not bankrupting the state per state. It's bankrupting all the individuals in the state. Okay, that's worse, right? So you're putting people in a position where they can't pay their electricity bills. They're keeping, I know people that are in their 80s that keep their temperature at 50 degrees so that they can pay the bill. That's wrong. That is just morally wrong. So, Hannah Pingree, I understand she's the, what do you call it? Not the lady in waiting, but she's like the heir apparent. She's the one that's supposed to, Mills has endorsed her and you're supposed to become. Why? You haven't done anything in your life that warrants in a way that helps Mainers, that warrants you being there. When you were in the legislature and you had your turn in the wheelhouse, you raised taxes, you raised regulations, you raised unfunded mandates, you put in place all this stuff that's making it impossible for people to have an affordable life. You're the one that went along. She was in charge of all the harm reduction when she worked for for Janet Mills. All these needles everywhere, all this crap that people have to deal with. If you step on a needle like the lady in Lewiston the other day, you got to go get tested for HIV, and you got to get it done in 72 hours or you're going to be a victim. Okay. And we got, we imagine the Portland City Council putting out, and this all goes back to Mills and it all goes back to Pingree because she was right at her right hand. And Bennett, all the way back to 1990, voted for a lot of this stuff. And then in the last 2 years turned himself into a progressive, and he voted for sanctuary city status, cut off the communication between the federal law enforcement community that can help us take down the traffickers and take down the Chinese grow houses and take down the illegals, cut off the comms between them and cut off the comms between DEA and ICE. That's an absurd state. That basically is pushing criminality at the expense of everyday people who pay the taxes. And I guess I'll just say, Hannah Pingree, to me, is the living embodiment of someone who thinks they are entitled in an entitlement state, entitled because she has sat in all the right chairs and because she's got money. Her mother holds office and she's got the Pingree name. Somehow she's entitled to a higher position in government. And that is not what Mainers want. That is the exact reason that I won by 20 points in a field of 8. That is the exact reason why Graham Plattner blew Mills out of the water. It is because people are sick and tired of this entitlement crap by the Augusta insiders. They just want, give me back my life is what they want, and I will do that. Isn't
it just make things normal?
Make things normal.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, and I worked for Reagan in his White House. Ronald Reagan was elected, they used to say, on 6 words. He was elected on lower taxes, smaller government, strong defense. And I would say in this state right now, lower taxes, smaller government, and public safety, or get the drug traffickers and illegal aliens out of here. And of course, we have the overlay right now of an energy sector that is in free fall. We've got, horizon to horizon solar cells and blowing the tops of mountains off. I ponder to myself, I always wonder how, there's a principle in psychology called cognitive dissonance. You can say one thing and believe something else. So I wonder how these people say, I love the mountains and I love the sunsets and I love the
natural beauty of Maine.
Yeah. And yet you're cutting the whole damn thing down. And if you covered the whole state with solar panels and you didn't have any organic farms because they're all covered with panels, and you didn't have any forest and you didn't have the eagles and you didn't have the rest, it would cover, I think the number Jim Lebrecht gave it to me the other day was something like 0.001 impact on the U.S. What do you call them? The fossil fuel gases, right? It's a ridiculous proposition, and yet they're willing to sacrifice. Well, maybe Graham Plattner illustrates that to us. They're willing to sacrifice principle for power. They're willing to sacrifice common sense for what they think is their ideological holy grail. I would tell you that's another big problem in this state. There is a loss of moral compass. There's a sense that somehow, going hard green, harder and harder and harder, pushing these renewables at being funded by everyday people who can't afford to fund it, is the holy grail. And it
isn't even green. I mean, I hate to be that
that's
guy,
a good point.
But I mean, you're
right.
blowing tops off mountains, right? You're a naturalist who loves the outdoors of Maine and the natural beauty of it or whatever. And you're literally taking TNT and blowing the tops off mountains so that you can flatten them out and create roads. So you can put up gigantic fiberglass windmills and have no plan for what happens when those things are decommissioned.
That's right.
The solar panel issue, I mean, we can all talk about the materials that they're made out of and where that's sourced from. I mean, it's a faulty worldview.
Yep.
But it's one of the greatest virtue signals of all time, right? It's like
I'm not even sure. I mean, I guess I'm going to. So yes, you're right, Matt. Okay, everything you just said was right. But I actually wonder if they even believe this. It's like at the end of the Soviet Union when this guy Edmund Morris did interviews of them in a biography for Reagan, and they ultimately confided we didn't really believe in it ourselves at the end. And so I wonder.
It's kind of a tool.
It's a tool. It's a wave to ride, right? If I can convince everybody that green is the thing, and that if solar, we're going to power everything in the world from the sun. God, I mean, that sounds like a Rube Goldberg machine I better invest in. That's gonna, golly, I mean, that's like, we can just have like one complete dog. It'll catch its tail and everything will be good. No, it doesn't work that way. And I think logic and reason have to be introduced back into politics. Forget all the ideology and the baloney that people, proselytize about and think, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. No, I'm going to come back to some really basic things on energy, on taxes, on schools, on things like the drug crisis. And it is a crisis. And Hanna is responsible for a huge chunk of that. And Mills is responsible for the high taxes and the high regulation and the high unfunded mandates and the energy costs that are uncontrollable and the drugs that are uncontrollable and the illegal aliens everywhere pulling down, free housing and Maine care to the horizon. And they are responsible for all of this. They own all of it. But if you back off for a minute and you look at things like the drug crisis, at a certain point in time, you have to say, even, I don't care if you're the furthest left Democrat, you probably have some friends that are also far left Democrats. You are affected by this. Not only is the crime rate, the assaults, the domestic violence, all this stuff is out there elevated by the drug crisis, but people, I guarantee they know people who've lost their kids to drugs. On my way to here today, Matt, I hesitate to say it out loud, but I will say it. There are friends that are part of a certain church, and they this last week they had 2 young people commit suicide. Whether it was related to drugs, whether it was related to depression, whether it was related, I don't know what it was related to, but those are lives.
It's an act of desperation, no matter what.
Yeah, but they were lives that were precious. And what's happened here is they've de-emphasized all that. I come back to what they used to call in the Vietnam War era the pine box phenomenon. Everybody says we're winning, or everybody says it's not really a big deal, or everybody says it's somebody else's problem, or everybody says don't worry about it, it'll fix itself. And I put things like drugs and mental health into that category. People say, that's not my problem. It's the homeless person's problem. It's that other family's problem. And then what happened in Vietnam is a pine box started coming home to your neighbor to the left and your neighbor to the right. And all of a sudden you realize, no, we're not winning. We're not winning this at all. We need to stop this. We're not winning this. This is the drug crisis in Maine. We had 8,000 overdoses last year. Those are the measured ones because of the Narcan. Some fatal, some non-fatal, probably 600 fatal. But I'm going to guarantee you the numbers are way higher than that. That's the people, now you can just take a box of Narcan and Narcan, your friends in the group house.
And nobody sees it.
And nobody sees it and nobody counts it.
Yep.
And frankly, an awful lot of the overdoses aren't counted that way either because the family that's left has to decide whether they rank it an overdose or a heart attack or and there's issues involved in that. And then if that's true in Maine, we got 8,000 overdoses and we get 600 dead kids. Why is it that in a state like South Dakota, which is a very similar demographic, it's rural, it's older, it's also got young people, why only 65 overdoses there? And the answer is they have Republican leadership. They have people who care about the kids. They do not accept failure as an outcome. They say, nope, we're going to fix it. And I'm going to tell you, as governor, I have plans in each of these areas. And the crazy part is at the age of 65, I have life experience in many, many of these areas. When it comes to law enforcement, I can help there. When it comes to sealing our border, I can help there. When it comes to addiction services, I can help there. When it comes to tax cutting, I can help there. When it comes to cutting bureaucrats, I can do that. And you look at all of this stuff. I was even an educator for 3 years myself. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. And I know right now that the Mills, Pingree approach, and Bennett's right on track with them. It doesn't work. Okay. If it, what's that old adage? If you keep doing the thing, the definition of insanity is to find something that doesn't work and keep doing it or not to change. We are in a moment right now where the majority, I would even dare say the overwhelming majority of this state, based on some of those polls about the independents and some of the conservative Democrats, they want change. And Matt, we are the vehicle of change. Myself, I personally believe Paul LePage will win the 2nd district. I also would note that Susan Collins has been a very responsible fiscal leader in this state. She's probably the 2nd most powerful person in the United States right now. She controls the entire budget. I can work with her to bring millions, tens of millions of dollars into this state. I can work with the Trump administration to bring tens of millions of dollars into this state to help on everything from agriculture to roads to drug addiction to economic support to I mean we don't always like to be dependent on the federal government. I'm a 10th Amendment guy. I like state level power because it's closer to the people. And I like local power even better. I spent an hour with the Maine Municipal Association, who are very worried about these unfunded mandates. I like local power better than I do state power, and I like state power better than I do federal power because, as our founding fathers clearly said, the closer to home, the more accountable, right? So if we want high growth and high accountability, we need to drive it as close as we can. But we're dependent on the federal government. And so if we're dependent, then we need to work and try to bring back to this state the resources that are going to help us fix the problems that the Democrats have created.
You said that basically many times through this conversation already that you're the agent of change. You're the one that's going to fix the status quo. Yeah, I had an opportunity to interview Hannah Pingree after she won her primary, just like I did you that same week, actually. And one of the interesting things was I asked her about her time in the Mills administration and what she did on things like energy. And her answer for why that was maybe not a good way to judge her and what she would do if she was governor was very clearly do more of that. Do it bigger. And you heard this a little bit from Shannon Bellows when she was running too.
I did.
That the fault and the problems, the reason why it hasn't been fixed is because we just didn't go big enough.
Yeah.
So it's basically a pitch to do what we've been doing, just do it bigger.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like that's a very good argument to be made to a lot of people that are dissatisfied with how things are, because it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like that's real.
So it is not real. Okay. I mean, if a brick doesn't fly, you make a bigger brick? Is that the idea? Now, I mean, how many people?
Or if you throw the brick at a window and it breaks the window and you make a bigger brick, does it break the house? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You could use all these metaphors. I will say right now, one of the great big arguments of Marxists, of course, they don't call themselves Stalinists, and they don't even like to call themselves communists, but those who believe in concentrated power, taking wealth away from the people who work and giving it to the people who don't work, those people always say that the Soviet Union failed because they did it the wrong way.
Right.
If we only did it the right way. So it's like, Mao killed millions of people as a communist, and Stalin killed millions of people. They just did it the wrong way.
Yeah, it wasn't real socialism.
Yeah, and by the way, what would it have meant if you did it bigger? I don't think that would have been a good plan either. So, we have people who make excuses for failure of individual responsibility on a minor level, and this is what I would call making an excuse for failure of responsibility at a major level. Look, it's very straightforward. Let's use a little logic here. You either were responsible for the things that it says on a sheet of paper that you were responsible for, the housing, the energy, the workforce, the drugs. Either you were responsible and you really screwed it up and we're paying a terrible price for how you screwed it up, or you weren't responsible. That was someone else's job. I'm going to blame that on Janet Mills, and you weren't doing jack. You weren't doing anything, okay? You were in the chair in a fake job, the Office of Innovation, which creates a new Office of New Americans.
And the future.
And the future. Well,
I
guess we're paying for that in the future, right? Her future was our past, and it's pretty ugly. So, you look at it and you say, don't you know how to take responsibility? And the answer is no, because they have lived in a world, a glass house. They've lived in a world where they can criticize everybody else and imagine that just more of their socialism will solve the problem. And what's happening now, and I go back to the little children's story, probably inapt in this era, but the little children's story of the emperor has no clothes. They say, no, the emperor has a grand new suit of clothes. And the little boy goes, I don't see any clothes. I don't think so. And then of course everybody else, and this is what's happening in my campaign, everybody else is going, you know what? It is screwed up. And it's so screwed up. And who screwed it up? Mills and Pingree screwed it up. And by the way, Bennett was part of that little program. He voted for the sanctuary cities and the extra needles and I'm trying to think of all the things that are now leftist. I think Rick Bennett's problem was he knew he couldn't get nominated in the Republican side, and he knew he couldn't get nominated on the Democrat side. But, it works in math, but it doesn't work in politics. Just because you were a moderate Republican and now you become a hard left progressive in all his votes doesn't put you in the center. It's not additive. you're either one or you're the other, and you used to be that one, and you're not that one anymore. You're way over here on the left. So I think the great irony is that a lot of what happened with Janet Mills, she goes before the moose drawing and gets booed, and she goes back to the mic again and again and again. Like, I can't really believe that even though I'm the governor, they don't like me, right? And Hannah Pingree, I watched her show up at these various things. I'm talking to people at some of the fairs about their property taxes and about very sobering issues, mental health issues and drug issues. And she goes up and gets a little, what does she call it, a fizzy drink, and talks about how wonderful her fizzy drink is. Or she just did a reel. I mean, honest to goodness, her island, just if you ever went out there are no encampments of homeless people there. There are no needles on the ground there. They don't have a problem paying their property taxes. I'm guessing she doesn't even look at that. She has some accountant do it. I'm sure they don't have much problem paying their electricity bill. So the great irony is she just did a reel, and I thought it was stunning. In fact, I thought it was so tone deaf that it looked like Mills. And even Mills wasn't this tone deaf. She had like a Gucci tote bag, and she says, I want to show you what's in my Gucci tote bag. And it's like name brand, got to describe the name brand. Now, mind you, most of the people I hang with, I've borrowed money out of my retirement for run for this race. I'm the Jimmy Stewart guy from It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I don't have any extra money. That's not how I work. I actually go to Shaw's or go to Hannaford. And if I'm going to go anywhere that's outside that, I got a bag. I pull it out from underneath my sink. That's where I keep them. And I got an automatic bag that I paid 99 cents for, and I'm good to go. So she's got this Gucci bag. I looked it up, 110, 120 bucks. She pulls out a water bottle that it costs 26 bucks to have. Most of us buy the little water bottle in a stack of 6 or 8, and that's how we go with the beach to the kids or whatever. And then what's the third thing? Oh, she has a sticker on here about a band she loves. So I never heard of this band before, so I look at it. I mean, I don't really have time to go to see bands, but in any event, she does. I look at the sticker. Their outdoor ticket prices are $70 to $300 for one ticket. And then I went, and her next thing was the thing that just blew me sideways. She pulls out something about this size that is a lip balm, that is a blueberry French toast lip balm, and she makes sure we know the Gucci name or whatever it is on the lip balm, so you can actually go look it up. So, and you can see this reel, and you can go look it up. Her lip balm costs $35. I thought, so the average person has a $1 or a 50-cent chapstick, a $1 bag. They have a bottle of water. They don't go to a lot of fancy bands. Oh, and then at the end, she goes, I have my tickets. Oh, and the rest of my bag is filled with tickets going in and out on the ferry. Well, you look those up. Those are $38 a pop. So she can go be away from all the needles and be away from all the homeless and be away from all the drug crime and be away from all the illegal aliens. And, I'm going to bet you 2 to 1, and I don't know. I'm going to bet you there isn't a wind tower in front of her house. I don't know. That's a gamble. But, she's got a mother that's been 20 years in the United States Congress, and there is not a single major bill you can point to that she did anything for the state of Maine. Nothing. And now, because she's got the same name, she thinks should be governor. Look, I got nothing against people living here, spending money, making money, doing a divorce settlement and coming away with, gazillions of dollars. That's fine. It's a free country. Do whatever you want. But don't tell me that that's a qualification for you to lead the rest of us who are average people who still work every day. I work every day. But beyond running for governor, I actually have a job. I still have to run a small company, and I do work tied to the defense. I do work tied to the AMAC group, which is the conservative alternative to AARP. I write 5 articles a week on there. And by the way, people can go to amac.us and they can see it. I am of the view that what makes me happy at night is being a hardworking guy. And I think that's what motivates a hardworking guy or woman. I think that's what motivates 80% of Maine. I do believe that there are people who think you can live off other people, and they'll probably vote for Pingree, but I just don't buy it. I think Mainers appreciate being known for hard work, a good moral compass, our legacy industries, lobstering, agriculture, logging. And even if you're not in those industries, if you're in the service industry or anywhere else, you're proud of Maine because of those things.
So, as we're talking, there is a 300-pound gorilla in the room. And I would say that it's actually a 300-pound gorilla that's also on the campaign for governor, because the Graham Plattner situation obviously blew up pretty spectacularly this week while you and I are talking.
Yep.
And I sort of was thinking about it today, and I haven't heard a single thing about your campaign, Hannah Pingree's campaign, Rick Bennett's campaign, anything going on with the governor's race or whatever for a good week or so.
Yeah.
Because it's so dominated everybody's attention. I mean, it's a national story at this point.
It is.
But as you walked in here, you also said to me that it's an example of, and a very stark one, of how dysfunctional and chaotic and all the things that are going on in the Democratic Party right now. Like they have this feeling like they can't lose, and yet they're organizing themselves in the most haphazard and chaotic way. They're nominating sociopaths for major offices. I mean, you can't watch that 11-minute video of his when he quit, supposedly, by the way, because he's maybe not on Monday going to actually file the paperwork. But you can't watch that and not come away from it saying, how could anyone have talked to this guy for 5 minutes and said, you are a great choice, you should do it.
Yeah.
And that's where they're at right now. So just tell me a little bit about how you break through that, though, because it's a problem, really. I mean, you got to find some way of getting enough oxygen and attention to say all the things you've been saying to me right now, like pay attention to me, vote for me, etc. But if they don't even hear your voice because they're so obsessed with this thing that's happening over there, I mean, they're going to have a convention in a week. They're going to have a 600-person convention of party insiders in a week to choose the next nominee. Yeah. That's going to dominate coverage, obviously. I mean,
it will. So there's 2 or 3 answers, and I'll kind of click them out. One is, this is actually, if you're shining a bright light, a Klieg light at the Democrat Party, it actually may very well help all the Republicans, because the Klieg light shows you 2 things in very clear refinement. One is that they picked a guy that was a complete loser. They all tagged themselves to him. Hannah Pingree, loved his endorsement, said great things about him. 20 of the legislators that are running to get back to the House or to get into the House actually fully endorsed him with full-throated endorsements. So the first thing you see is that the Democrat Party has no, I'll call it, moral fiber. What they were willing to do is sell their souls, because this guy could raise a lot of money. He was getting a lot of national attention. I'm going to ride his coattails. He's going to be good for me. And then
they were willing to make a deal with the devil.
They were willing to make a deal with the devil. And I called out all the Democrats, including Hannah Pingree, weeks ago and said, disavow this guy. Where are you? He's assaulted 3 women already. That's before we got this rape allegation. He's done all these ugly things that I don't even want to talk about. And he hates blacks, and he hates all these people. Okay. Why in the world would you ever want the endorsement of this guy? Why wouldn't you disavow it? Why wouldn't any of those legislators? So the first thing you see is opportunism 101, bright light on that. Now, flip the switch. They all say they're in favor of democracy. They spend all their time waving signs out there on bridges saying that we need democracy and, blah, blah, blah. And I know we live in a republic, but regardless, they keep saying, we need this, we need this. And what are you doing? You're taking, the flip side of this coin is that you have a person who got more than 200,000, one of the biggest numbers ever to turn out in favor of a Democrat nominee for the Senate. And you are literally, all of a sudden, they had held the news on the rape charge. All of a sudden, they reveal that. All of a sudden, they reveal that they've got a Medicaid investigation into him that came out of nowhere, just at that magic moment between the nomination and when he's got to withdraw if they're going to put one of their own people in. And what you see is exactly what happened with Joe Biden. And I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, quite obviously, right? But they threw Joe Biden under the bus so they could grab their favorite child or their favorite, person in the form of Kamala Harris. What did they do? What are they going to do here? They've taken the guy that got all the money, the guy that had all the attention, the guy that was on track, because you've got so many people who want an outsider in. That's really the driver. They wanted that. That's why all those votes happened, as we talked about earlier. They are sick and tired of insiders. They vote the guy in, and now what happens? They flush him down the toilet and put in an insider. Okay, and the insider
through an insider process too,
and through an insider process, which is anti-democratic. So I guess the first thing I'm going to say to you is this is a bright Klieg light. This is a Hogan's Heroes bright light on the object, and the object is a completely chaotic, breaking down Democrat Party that has no honor, that doesn't care as long as they can hold power. Well, that is revealing. That is very revealing to a lot of independents and to conservatives and even to the outsider-oriented Democrats who say, you know what? I'm not going to vote for that candidate. I'm not going to vote for any of those candidates. They're all part of the insider cabal. They're all part of the little Soviet Politburo of Maine. No, I'm not voting for them. That's number one. Number two, we actually have a number of really significant questions. Getting people to focus on policy, as you know, at the Policy Institute is hard. You know, you got to put a cartoon on the cover of the policy paper or something, right? So I have policies in all these areas, and in the next 2 weeks, I'll tease it out a little bit. We're going to do a big press conference on how our tax policy feeds into discretionary income, into consumption, into investment, into better jobs, how it's really supported by the education innovations, supported in turn by the cost reductions to towns and counties by rolling back the mandates, also by the energy costs coming down. And we're gonna do a big press conference on I've got some other obligations between now and about 2 weeks from now, but we're going to do a big one rolling out how the tax policies will really work on the income taxes, on the property taxes, and all the feedback loops that'll come back in to support high growth. And again, this entire campaign is really based on just 2 words. If Reagan was elected on 6, I'll say I'll get elected on 2, and they are growth and accountability. Growth is absolutely essential in this state.
It's at 0 right now.
Yeah, we're slipping into stagnation, which is followed by chasing the tax base right out of the state. And if we want to become, Bolivia, let's stay on that course. But if we don't, if we would prefer to become like Florida and have a very prosperous economy and really have people coming here to bring good jobs in our education system, producing great futures for our kids, then we need to focus on growth and accountability. And the last thing I'll say, beyond putting actual events on the table, is we actually are getting an extraordinary amount of both earned media. I mean, I've had Fox talking to me, Real America's Voice talking to me, I've talked, and the funny part is every time they call to talk to me about Plattner, I immediately start talking about our race, the race with Pingree. But I also point out that Plattner represents something very important that is emblematic of what's going to happen in this governor's race, probably also going to happen in the LePage race, may, God willing, also happen in the legislative races. And that is that when I was young, we would go over to Monmouth. I was in Wayne. We'd go to Monmouth, or we'd go somewhere nearby to apple orchards, and we'd pick apples in the fall. And they would typically get put, at that time, I mean, you could make them into cider and things, but they'd get put into a wooden box, and even in some cases a barrel. At the very bottom of an apple box or barrel, when it's been there a while, is just muck. That's all that's there. It isn't apples anymore. It's just muck.
The bottom of the barrel.
The bottom of the barrel, it's muck. And so this is the Democrat bench. All they've got is muck. They've got retreads in Troy Jackson and Pingree, and if they put Mills in, then Mills. I doubt they will, but you've got retreads.
A list of losers.
Losers.
They just lost these races.
But this
one will be different.
Right? Oh yeah, right. Of course, yeah. This will be the one. And so what you're seeing is the third thing I'll say is that Graham Plattner illustrates that the Democratic Party in this state has no bench. There's nothing left. They are all Augusta insider elitists who think that because they have power, they will always have power. And arrogance and ignorance together are an extraordinary force for change, because people hate arrogance and they hate ignorance. And I will tell you again, if you were to put this in stark contrast, this is about growth and accountability with me and with the Republicans in the legislature. Growth and accountability on one hand, versus on the other hand, I'll say normalized bureaucracy, government incompetence, and government corruption. And that is what Hannah Pingree and Troy Jackson and all these other people represent. And this is what most Mainers actually in the quiet of the night want. If we could take the labels off everybody running, we would win by 85%, because people are just, Matt, I've been all over this state. They are just sick of it. Whether I'm in Portland, I was walking down the street in Portland last week. I'm in Portland a lot. I'm in Sanford. I'm in Wells. I'm in, on the coast. I spend time everywhere. Ronald Reagan, for whom I worked, went into, didn't matter how Democrat an area it was, he went in to talk to them. And I was always of the view that he whenever he went into a room, he either thought people already agreed with him, or by the time he was done, they would. And very often they did, because he talked common sense too. But I was walking down a street in Portland, and of course, you never know whether someone's going to, I'm tentative a little bit. I'm very convicted about the things I believe. But the old military part of me that looks at situational awareness and has a 360 on everything. So this woman's coming very vigorously down the street, and she has pink glasses in the shape of hearts, and she has a tie-dye shirt, and I'm just thinking, okay. And she does a double take. She walks by me, stops, and looks back at me. This is either going to be good or bad, right? This is how I always think about it. And she goes, "You Bobby Charles?" I said, "I am." She goes, "You know what? I voted for you." I said, "Really? Why?" She said, "Because I have kids," and she went into that. And then one of her kids is in addiction treatment. And she said, "You know what? I trust you." At the end of the day, if we can just model honorable behavior, if we can just speak truth to power, we'll get there. And I grew up in this state back when Boy Scouts still existed. And, I sometimes say, you learned the Scout law. And I say, why can't we use that Scout law that we learned that many years ago that we expected of our leaders? Why should we not expect that now of our leaders? And the Scout law was everybody was supposed to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Why shouldn't we expect that of our leaders? I just have to keep getting the message out that you have every right to expect that, and you should expect that of me, and you should expect that of everybody that works in my administration. And if I find corruption in my administration, they will be dismissed and prosecuted. That's the way it works in a true government. Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, I don't know, the founding fathers, Ronald Reagan. These were people who held themselves to account. Whatever their personal failings, they held themselves and the government to account on behalf of the people that elected them. We should be expecting that of our leaders.
The rot that you were just kind of identifying in the Democratic Party, the lack of any bench, the bottom of the barrel, mentality about the candidates and whatnot. It strikes me that the reason it's like that is because of their lack of accountability for like these mistakes and these catastrophic policies they've engaged in.
Yep.
Because they do them, and then there's another election that comes 2 years later, and they are returned to power. So they've gotten the message that there really is no consequence for anything that we're doing right now. So we might as well just keep doing it because it's working.
Yep.
We are maintaining power for 8 years plus. But it just breeds this arrogance that is likely to be, it's very biblical. It's right. Like,
Yes,
the haughty spirit before a fall, right? It's just the exact same kind of dynamic. And this is not a blue state. I mean, I'll say it until I am blue in the face. Yep. You realize that right now, the margin between Republicans and Democrats in the state of Maine is narrower than it was when Paul LePage got elected.
Yes, that's right.
By about half a percentage point.
And I'll give you everything you just said, Matt.
So you just believe you're going to win forever in that state? I mean,
no, this is the essence of arrogance, right? You think that you'll hold power forever because you do. And it's, I'm sure.
I mean, they're on a nice winning streak, but get over yourselves.
Absolute, what was it? Who was it? It wasn't Sir Francis
Voltaire,
Bacon.
I think you're talking
about.
Was
it Voltaire? Absolute power corrupts. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And then, but I'll tell you that there are historical precedents very near at hand that show us already what's going to happen. In 1994, just before I started working for Gingrich for 5 years, and Gingrich endorsed me in this race, he came up with this thing, a contract with America. And he came up with it because he felt that people were sick and tired of being used and abused by the national level House of Representatives. And, you had a guy, Tip O'Neill, had been succeeded by a guy named Wright. I can't remember his first name, but Speaker Wright. And Gingrich properly discerned that people were sick of this. They had been in power, just like the Maine legislature. I mean, 30 of the last 32 years, they've owned that building. That's exactly what had happened at the national level with the Democrats, except they had owned it like 38 of 40 years, okay? And so he discerned people wanted a positive change. They wanted to trust their leadership. They did not want more of the same. And they believed, the Democratic Party nationally believed that they would pick up seats in 1994. They lost a net of 52 seats. A net of 52 seats. They were blown out of the freaking water, and they couldn't grasp what had happened. They didn't understand arrogance does not sell. They didn't understand that doing more of the same and doing more and more and more of the same, just because you got the money that you keep taking from people, doesn't work. I mean, just to give you a sneak peek of the tax plan and what we're planning, and I do think we can get $1 billion out the first year with waste and abuse and duplication and really focused attention on the big spending areas, and we'll hire more investigators, and we'll have IGs in these departments, and we'll work at accountability as, again, one of the two central pieces of this: growth, all the growth policy economically, and accountability. But I think one of the things people don't realize is that this is this is a government where if we can just focus tightly on what people want and stop spending money that we don't have on things they don't want and that they can't afford, we will put ourselves in a much better position. And I say that because the real problem is, again, a sneak peek, one of the things we want to do is use this state generates surpluses, has generated surpluses year over year. And the problem is the Democrats just turn around and spend the surplus and create more programs that are like barnacles on the bottom of the ship. That should be put, as LePage did, back in a tax relief fund so that goes back to seeding the ending of the income tax, at least the personal income tax. And so the problem is we're not talking about responsible, mature adult leadership. Having run a multi-billion-dollar operation, I will tell you that mature leadership, and I ran programs in 70 countries. I fired contractors. I forced contractors to disgorge money and give it back to the government. I insisted on accountability, and I didn't even think it was controversial. I literally believe every dollar that the government spends comes out of some hardworking person's back pocket. And so we have to be good stewards of that dollar. And what I did is I forced a change in hundreds of millions of dollars of programs. That's what we got to do in the state of Maine. These 6,000 contracts that were non-compete sole source and probably many of them criminal. We need to claw that money back. We need to have a governor who goes to Lewiston and claws back the money and holds people accountable for a steering committee for the Shooting Victims Fund who put $2 million in their own back pockets. I did a crosswalk of everybody on that steering committee, a crosswalk with the organizations that got the money, and the people on that committee gave that money to their own organizations. That is a felonious conflict of interest in most states. But at the very least, it is a failure of fiduciary responsibility to the victims who deserve that money and those families. And they still need that money, and they still need counseling. And the real reason I'm running, Matt, is injustice burns me up. It pisses me off. Government wasting money, crooks in government, people doing things that are just wrong burns me up. And I think it does the average person, and most people in Maine feel powerless. So you know what?
It's abusing the public trust.
It's abusing the public trust.
That is why everyone's so mad right now.
That is why they're mad. And they have a right to be mad.
Left, right, center, you are upset with things because people have abused the public trust.
That's it. We need people in government that you can trust, because that's who they are and have been all their life, not people who have been there sucking off the government and saying, I deserve to be here because I've been here. Rick Bennett since 1990, Hannah Pingree, because I deserve to be here. Why? Because I've been here. No, that's not a reason to be here. You're responsible. That's the reason to oust you, because you're responsible for all
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah.
Look at what's happening with this Graham Plattner race.
Yeah.
The people that are seeking to replace him, and by the way, I just was looking at my phone really quickly, and he actually officially just withdrew. So he sent the letter to the Secretary of State. But each and every one of the people that just ran for something and lost is, and I'm not making this up, taking their old campaign signs, putting tape over, the office they were just running for, taking a Sharpie out and actually running or writing the word Senate instead of governor and things like that.
It's crazy.
Kind of highlighted to me that these people's aspiration is to a job title. It's to holding some position of power. It's a status. It's things like that.
Yep.
It has very little to do with merit or
problem solving.
Yeah.
They don't give a damn that people
service.
look, all over this state. I've met, again, 20, 25,000 Mainers. They cannot pay their property taxes. They're in debt. They can't pay the electricity bill. They're in debt. Their kids are leaving the state. They're leaving the state. The state is in deep, deep trouble. I use the word peril. I can't think of a better word. It's in peril. These people don't give a crap about any of that. They just want, hey, a new office. I can run it. I'm going to run. It's like seagulls going after a dead fish. I mean, they have to have it. It's a compulsion that they have to have the power. And that is exactly why they should not have the power. As far as I'm concerned, throw all the Democrats out of the legislature. The 20 that supported Plattner, the couple that are thinking that they should be a senator, throw them all out. There's a reason. There's a phrase in American history: throw the bums out, because at a certain point they become abusive, and they have become abusive. Not only was Graham Plattner personally abusive, but these people are abusive with the taxpayers. It is time for them to go.
Well, that's about the time we have here today, so we have to kind of wrap things up here. But as we do, you have a long campaign ahead of you. It's, several months ahead, and there's plenty more conversations I'm sure you and I will have between now and then. But what's your one parting message for everybody that's listening to this right now? You've heard a good pitch. You've heard, a diagnosis of problems and a lot of the things you'd like to do to fix it. But, there's going to be debates upcoming. There's going to be conversations galore. So tell me exactly what the sort of message that you want people to hold is.
So I think on a practical level, and very, very practically, pay attention and tell friends if you believe that we're on the right track with this campaign and that Republicans should be put back in a position of responsibility. Tell your friends about it. Talk to friends that are Democrats. Talk to friends that are independents. Understand that destiny is in our hands. But I'll also give you a note of optimism. I see tons and tons of data. We have done very expensive deep dive polls in all the counties of the state. I check the demographics, many questions being asked. We, to borrow from my old boss, Ronald Reagan, we have a rendezvous with destiny. This is the year that Maine history changes, and we're seeing signs of it everywhere. And I just say, when the wave builds under you, ride that wave. Follow it to the shore. Understand that it is on us now. We are in charge of our own destiny. And if we're going to make that rendezvous happen, we have to get up, believe it can happen. As I tell kids, as I tell, groups of people, everything good that happens in life is a 3-step process. You have to envision it. You have to believe it can be you, and then you have to work your tail off as if it is it is entirely dependent on you. You have to envision it, you have to believe in it, and work for it as if the entire enterprise depended on you and you alone. If we do that, Matt, this state, 15 months from now, fundamentally will be a red state, a fiscally responsible state. People will be able to afford their bills again. People will be able to feel that they're secure again. They're going to let their kids get on a bicycle and ride a ways and not feel that that they could be in peril. And we're going to be in a state where we have high integrity leadership. So if you want high integrity leadership, if you believe that matters, and I urge you to please believe it matters, then elect me, but also elect all the Republicans that represent that in your own district and into the legislature, because that's the only way we codify this and make integrity the calling card of Maine.
Bobby Charles, candidate for governor of Maine, nice enough to stop by today for the Pine Tree Pulse podcast. We really sincerely appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll have many more conversations. Look forward to it when it happens. But we'll keep this train rolling next week. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back again soon.
Thank you.